The stars were quiet that night. They always were in deep space, far from the busy shipping lanes and crowded stations of the inner colonies. Out here, in the black emptiness between stars, a ship could travel for weeks without seeing another vessel. The human frigate, Indomitable, had been on patrol for 3 months. It was a small ship, built for speed rather than power. Its crew of 200 men and women had grown used to the loneliness of deep space. They checked sensors, ran drills, and waited for something to happen. Captain Park Ga stood on the bridge, looking out at the endless darkness. She was a tall woman with short black hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. At 42 years old, she had spent half her life in space. The Indomitable was her third command, and she loved it like a second home. "Captain," said Lieutenant Kim Do-yoon from his station, "I am picking up something strange on long-range sensors." Ga turned to look at him. Do-yoon was young, only 26, but he was one of the best communications officers in the fleet. His fingers moved across his console with practiced speed. "What kind of strange?" Ga asked. "Multiple contacts. Many of them. They just appeared out of nowhere." Commander Yoon Harry stepped closer to the main display. She was Ji-hee's second in command, a serious woman who rarely smiled. Her job was to worry about everything, and she was very good at it. "How many contacts?" Harry asked. Do-hyun was quiet for a moment. His face grew pale. 700, Commander. 700 ships." The bridge fell silent. Every officer stopped what they were doing and looked at the sensor display. The screen showed a wall of red dots spreading across space like a disease. Each dot was an enemy vessel. "Lilith," Ji-hee said quietly. The word tasted like poison in her mouth. The Velith were the nightmare that kept humanity awake at night. They had appeared from beyond known space 50 years ago, and they had been conquering everything in their path ever since. 37 intelligent species had fallen to them. Entire civilizations had been destroyed, their people taken as slaves or used for terrible experiments. Humanity had fought them 3 times. Each battle had been a disaster. The Velith ships were faster, stronger, and more advanced than anything humans could build. Their weapons could cut through shields like they were made of paper. Their soldiers felt no fear and showed no mercy. "They are hailing us," Do-hyun said. His voice shook slightly. "Put it through," Ga ordered. The main screen flickered, and then a Velith appeared. It was a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms. Its head was long and narrow, with large black eyes that showed no emotion. When it spoke, its translator turned the clicking sounds into words that humans could understand. "Human vessel. You have 30 seconds to lower your shields and surrender unconditionally. If you do not comply, you will be destroyed." The message ended. A timer appeared on the screen, counting down from 30. Navigation Officer Baek Yoon-ji looked up from her station. "Captain, what do we do?" Ga did not answer right away. She was thinking about the situation. The Indomitable was alone, far from any help. Their distress signal would take 6 hours to reach the nearest friendly forces. By then, they would all be dead. But if they surrendered, the Velith would take everything. They would access the ship's navigation computer. They would find the locations of every human colony in the outer sectors. 12 million people lived in those colonies. Farmers, miners, families with children. 25 seconds, Do-hyun announced. Engineering Chief Kang Soo-min called from her station near the back of the bridge. "Captain, I should tell you something. If we surrender, they will find our colony data. There is no way to delete it in time." "I know," Ga said. "Those colonies have no real defenses," Soo-min continued. "If the Velith find them—" "I know," Ga said again, more firmly. Harry stepped close to her captain and spoke quietly. "Ga, there is no way out of this. We cannot fight 700 ships. We cannot run, and we cannot surrender. 20 seconds, Do-hyun said. Ji-hye closed her eyes. In her mind, she saw the faces of her crew. 200 people who trusted her to lead them. 200 people who had families waiting for them back home. Then she thought of the 12 million people in the outer colonies. Children playing in artificial sunlight. Farmers growing food in underground gardens. Old people sitting on benches, watching ships come and go. She opened her eyes. "Helm," she said. Her voice was calm and steady. "Plot an intercept course for the Velith command vessel." Yoonji stared at her. "Captain? You heard me. Their biggest ship. The one in the center. Plot a course directly at it." 15 seconds, Do-hyun whispered. Yoonji's hands were shaking as she worked her console. "Captain, that is a suicide run. We will never survive." "I did not ask you if we would survive," Ji-hye said. "I asked you to plot the course." Harry understood what her captain was planning. "You want to ram them?" "Yes." "Our little frigate against their command ship?" "Yes." Suman spoke up from her station. "Captain, if I push the reactor beyond safe limits, we can hit them harder. Much harder. The explosion will be significant." 10 seconds, Do-hyun said. Ji-hye nodded at Suman. "Do it. All power to engines and forward shields." "We are going straight through." Medical Officer Choi Yuna stepped onto the bridge. She had heard the announcement and come to see what was happening. When she understood the situation, her face became very still. "Captain," she said quietly, "are you sure about this?" "The Velith gave us two choices," Ji-hye replied. "Surrender and let them kill millions. Or die fighting and take their commander with us." She paused. "I choose the second option." 5 seconds, Do-hyun said. Ji-hye opened a channel to the entire ship. Her voice echoed through every corridor, every room, every corner of the Indomitable. "All hands, this is the captain. In a few moments, we are going to do something that has never been done before. We are going to attack the Velith directly. We are going to hit their command ship with everything we have." She paused, looking around at her bridge crew. Yoonji was crying silently at her station. Do-hyun had stopped counting and was simply listening. Harry stood with her hands clasped behind her back, her face showing nothing but respect. "I will not lie to you," Ji-hye continued. "Most of us will not survive this, but our deaths will mean something. We will protect the colonies. We will show these aliens that humanity does not break. We will teach them that some things are worth dying for." The countdown reached 0. On the screen, the Velith ships began powering their weapons. 700 vessels prepared to destroy one small frigate. "It has been an honor serving with all of you," Ji-hye said. "Now let us show them what humans are made of." She sat down in her command chair and gripped the armrests. "Engage." The Indomitable leaped forward. Its engines burned bright blue as it accelerated toward the heart of the Velith Armada. Behind them, weapons fire began streaking through space. Ahead of them waited 700 enemy ships and almost certain death. But Park, Ji-hye smiled. The Velith had given them 30 seconds to surrender. They had no idea what they had just started. The Indomitable flew like an arrow through the darkness of space. Every engine on the ship was burning at maximum power. The reactor, normally kept at safe levels, was now pushing beyond every limit. Warning lights flashed throughout the vessel. Alarms screamed in the corridors. The hull shook and groaned under the stress of such extreme acceleration, but the little frigate did not break. It flew on, faster and faster, heading straight toward the heart of the Velith Armada. Captain Park Ji-hye watched the tactical display on her screen. The enemy formation was clear now. 700 ships arranged in perfect circles, layer after layer, like the rings of a target. and at the very center sat the command vessel, the largest ship in the fleet. "Enemy ships are responding," Commander Yoon Harry reported. Her voice was steady, but her knuckles were white as she gripped her console. "Multiple vessels breaking formation to intercept us. Time to target," GA asked. Navigation Officer Baek Yoonji checked her readings. "At current speed, 4 minutes and 30 seconds. 4.5 minutes. An eternity in space combat." The first Velith weapon's fire reached them seconds later. Green energy bolts streaked across the void, slamming into the Indomitable's forward shields. The ship shuddered with each hit. "Shields at 70%, Harry announced. GA turned to Yoonji. "Can you find us a path through their formation? Use their own ships as cover." Yoonji studied the display, her mind working faster than any computer. She was the best navigator in the fleet, able to plot courses that other officers could not even imagine. Now she had to prove it. "Yes, Captain. If I weave between their capital ships, they will not be able to fire without hitting each other." "Do it." The Indomitable began to dance. There was no other word for it. Yoonji guided the ship through impossible turns and sudden changes of direction. They passed within meters of enemy vessels, so close that they could see the weapon ports on their hulls. The Velith commanders faced a terrible choice. They could fire and risk destroying their own ships, or they could hold their weapons and let the human frigate pass. Most chose to hold fire, but not all. "Shields at 52%, Harry called out. 47, 43. Down in engineering, Chief Kang Suman was fighting her own battle. The engine room was filled with smoke and sparks. Power cables hung from the ceiling. One of her team members had been burned badly when a conduit exploded. "Chief, the reactor temperature is critical," shouted one of her engineers. "If we keep this up, the core will melt down." Suman wiped sweat from her face and looked at the readings. The young man was right. They were pushing the reactor far beyond anything it was designed to handle. Normal procedure would be to reduce power immediately and begin emergency shutdown, but there was nothing normal about this situation. "Keep it running," Suman ordered. "We only need 3 more minutes." "But Chief, the ship will tear itself apart." "Then it will tear itself apart," Suman said calmly. "But it will do so while hitting that Velith command ship at full speed." She moved to another console and began making adjustments. There were tricks she knew, things they did not teach at the academy. Ways to squeeze just a little more power from a dying engine. Ways to keep a reactor burning hot without quite exploding. "I need everyone to stay calm," she told her team. "We have a job to do. Let us do it well." On the bridge, Lieutenant Kim Do-yoon was listening to enemy communications. His job was to translate the Velith language, to understand what they were saying to each other. What he heard surprised him. "Captain," he said, "they are confused. Their commanders are arguing about what we are doing." "What do you mean?" GA asked. "They do not understand why we are not running away. Their tactical computers predicted that we would try to escape when we saw their fleet. They had plans for chasing us, for cutting off our retreat. But they have no plans for this." Harry almost laughed. They never expected anyone to attack them. "No species has ever done this," Do-yoon confirmed. "In their entire history of conquest, no enemy has ever charged toward them instead of away." GA felt a grim satisfaction. The Velith were the greatest warriors in the galaxy. They had destroyed countless civilizations. But they had never faced an enemy willing to die rather than surrender until now. "Shields at 31%, Harry reported. "We are taking heavy damage to the outer hull. Decks 4 through 7 have been evacuated. Time to target? 2 minutes, 15 seconds. They were getting closer. The command ship was visible now on the main screen, a massive structure covered with weapons and sensor arrays. It was beautiful in a terrible way, like a predator that had never known defeat. In the medical bay, Dr. Choi Yuna was treating the wounded. Several crew members had been injured when weapons fire hit the ship. Burns, broken bones, internal bleeding. She moved from patient to patient, doing what she could. A young ensign grabbed her arm. He could not have been older than 20, with fear written all over his face. "Doctor, are we really going to die?" Yuna looked at him for a long moment. She could lie to him. She could tell him that everything would be fine, that they would somehow survive. But she respected him too much for that. "Probably," she said honestly. "But we are going to die well. We are going to die protecting people who cannot protect themselves. That is worth something." "It is worth something." The ensign swallowed hard. Then, slowly, he nodded. Okay, I can do that." Yuna squeezed his hand. "I know you can." Back on the bridge, the situation was becoming desperate. The shields were failing. Hull breaches were opening across the ship. Systems were shutting down one by one, but they were almost there. 1 minute to target, Yunji announced. Her broken arm was splinted now, set roughly by a fellow officer. It hurt terribly, but she ignored the pain. The Velith command ship finally understood what was happening. It began to move, trying to get out of the way. But ships that size did not move quickly. It was like watching a mountain try to dodge a bullet. "They are hailing us again," Delhyun said, surprise in his voice. "Put it through," GA ordered. The same Velith commander appeared on screen. But something was different now. There was something in those black eyes that had not been there before. Something that might have been fear. "Human vessel. Stop your approach immediately. We are prepared to offer terms. We can negotiate a peaceful solution." GA stood up from her chair. Her uniform was torn and dirty. Blood ran from a cut on her cheek. But her eyes burned with fierce determination. "You gave us 30 seconds to surrender unconditionally," she said. "Now I will give you our response." She leaned forward. "We accept your original offer. Unconditional surrender. We are surrendering our ship unconditionally to your command vessel. Right now, at maximum velocity." The Velith commander stared at her. For the first time in perhaps 10,000 years, it had no idea what to say. 30 seconds to impact, Yunji announced. GA smiled coldly at the screen. "Time is running out. You should probably do something about that." She cut the transmission. The bridge crew looked at each other. Despite everything, despite the fear and the pain and the knowledge that death was coming, someone started to laugh. Then another person joined in. And another. They were going to die. But they were going to die on their own terms, laughing in the face of an enemy that had never been challenged. 20 seconds, Yunji said. "All hands," GI announced over the ship's speakers. "Brace for impact. And remember this moment. Whatever happens next, remember that we chose this. We chose to fight. We chose to protect. We chose to be human." The Indomitable screamed toward its target. Behind it, the Velith Armada watched in stunned silence as the impossible happened. A single human ship was about to do what no one had ever done before. It was about to make the Velith bleed. The last 10 seconds felt like hours. Captain Park GA gripped the armrests of her command chair as the Velith command ship filled the entire viewport. It was so close now that she could see individual lights on its surface. She could see the weapon batteries turning toward them in a final, desperate attempt to stop the impact. But it was too late. Far too late. 5 seconds, Navigation Officer Beak Yunji said. Her voice was surprisingly calm. 4, 3, 2. The Velith activated an emergency shield. It was their last defense, a barrier of pure energy designed to stop anything from passing through. The shield blazed into existence, brilliant white and seemingly unbreakable. 1. The Indomitable hit the shield at full speed. For exactly 1.3 seconds, the barrier held. The ship's nose crumpled against it, metal folding like paper. Crew members were thrown from their stations. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks. The entire vessel screamed in protest. Then the shield failed that the Indomitable punched through and buried itself deep into the heart of the Velith command ship. Metal tore through metal. Decks collapsed on top of each other. The human frigate drove itself deeper and deeper, carrying fire and destruction with it. And then the reactor exploded. Chief Kang Suman had done her job well. She had pushed the reactor far beyond its limits, storing up energy like a bomb waiting to go off. When the explosion came, it was more powerful than anyone had expected. The blast tore the Velith command ship in half, for 3 star systems in every direction. The explosion was visible. A ball of fire expanding outward, consuming everything in its path. The Velith ships nearest to the blast were vaporized instantly. Those farther away were thrown backward by the force, and at the center of it all, the command vessel died. The ship that had led the Velith conquest for 1,000 years was gone, along with its commander and its entire crew. When the light finally faded, there was only debris. Twisted metal floating in silence. Radiation spreading outward in invisible waves. A graveyard in the void of space. But something impossible had happened. Not everyone had died. The Indomitable was designed with strong internal bulkheads. Walls that could seal off different sections of the ship. When the collision happened, several compartments had survived. They were damaged, broken, barely holding together. But they were still there. Commander Yoon Harry woke up in darkness. Her head hurt terribly, and she could feel blood on her face. She tried to move and found that she was pinned under something heavy. "Hello?" she called out. Her voice was weak and hoarse. "Is anyone there?" A light flickered on nearby. Emergency power barely working. "Commander?" It was Lieutenant Kim Do-yoon's voice. "Commander, I am here. Are you hurt?" "I think so. I cannot move my legs." "Is the ship?" Do-yoon was quiet for a moment. "There is not much ship left, Commander. But we are alive. Somehow." More voices called out in the darkness. Navigation Officer Baek Yoonji was alive, though her arm was definitely broken now in several places. Engineering Chief Kang Suman had made it somehow, protected by a fallen beam that had formed a shelter over her. Dr. Choi Yuna was alive and already moving through the wreckage, looking for wounded, and then they found the captain. Park Ji-ae was still in her command chair. The entire front section of the bridge had been torn away, leaving nothing but empty space and stars. She was pinned on the debris from the collapsed ceiling, unconscious and bleeding. "Captain!" Harry dragged herself toward her commander. "Captain, can you hear me?" Ji-hee's eyes opened slowly. She looked around at the destruction, at the stars visible through the broken hull, at the faces of her surviving crew. "Did we hit them?" she whispered. Do-hyun checked the only console that was still working. Its screen was cracked and flickering, but it could still display sensor readings. "Yes, Captain. We hit them. The command ship is completely destroyed." Ji-ae closed her eyes and smiled. "Good. That is very good." Getting the survivors organized was difficult. The ship had no power, no life support, and very little air remaining. Yuna estimated that they had maybe 2 hours before the oxygen ran out. They gathered in the most intact section they could find, a storage compartment deep in the ship's core. 47 people out of the original 200 crew members. Some were badly wounded. Others were in shock. But they were alive. Soo-min managed to get a small generator working, giving them light and a little bit of heat. Yoonji, despite her broken arm, worked on the emergency beacon. If they could get it transmitting, maybe someone would find them. The Velith fleet, Harry said quietly to GA. What are they doing? Do-hyun had been monitoring the few sensors that still worked. What he reported was hard to believe. They are leaving, Commander. The entire fleet is withdrawing. Leaving? 400 ships are running away from a piece of debris. It appears so. Their command structure was on that ship. Their fleet admiral, their senior officers, their entire leadership. We killed them all. The remaining ships have no orders. They do not know what to do. GA tried to sit up, but the pain was too much. She lay back down and stared at the ceiling. We broke them, she said softly. Not with numbers. Not with better weapons. Just by refusing to give up. The hours that followed were the longest of their lives. The oxygen grew thin. The cold crept in. Several of the wounded died, despite Yuna's best efforts. But Yoonji got the beacon working. A weak signal, barely more than a whisper, broadcasting their position to anyone who might be listening. 12 hours after the impact, sensors detected new contacts approaching. More Veleth? Someone asked fearfully. Do-hyun shook his head, tears forming in his eyes. No, those are human signatures. That is one of our carrier groups. The rescue fleet had been responding to the original distress call. They had expected to find debris and death. Instead, they found something impossible. Survivors. The carrier Eternal Dawn was the first to arrive. Its captain, Admiral Shin Tae-woo, stared at his sensor display in disbelief. The debris field was enormous, filled with wreckage from both the Veleth command ship and dozens of other vessels that had been too close to the explosion. But there, in the center of it all, was a small compartment with human life signs. Get rescue teams out there immediately, Tae-woo ordered. I want every survivor found and brought aboard. The rescue operation took 4 hours. Shuttle after shuttle flew into the debris field, picking up the wounded and the dying. Medical teams worked around the clock, saving lives that should have been lost. GA was one of the last to be rescued. She had refused to leave until all of her crew were safe. When the medics finally carried her aboard the Eternal Dawn, she was barely conscious. Tae-woo met her in the medical bay. He looked at this woman who had done the impossible, who had taken a single frigate and used it to kill a Veleth fleet admiral. Captain Park, he said, you have no idea what you have done. GA looked at him with tired eyes. I know exactly what I did, Admiral. I protected my people. You did more than that. Tae-woo held up a datapad showing galactic communications. The entire galaxy is talking about this. Every species, every world, everyone knows what happened here. They are calling it the impact. The impact? The moment when humanity showed the Veleth that they could be hurt. The moment when one small ship changed everything. GA closed her eyes. She thought of her crew, the ones who had died and the ones who had survived. She thought of the colonies they had protected, the millions of lives they had saved. Maybe it was worth it. Maybe all the death and pain and sacrifice meant something after all. Good, she whispered. Then it was not for nothing. As she drifted off to sleep, surrounded by doctors and nurses working to save her life, she did not know that the galaxy was watching. She did not know that her choice, made in 30 seconds, would spark a fire that would never go out. But that is a story for another time. The news spread faster than light itself. Within hours of the battle, every intelligent species in 3 galaxies knew what had happened. Communications channels buzzed with the story. News broadcasters repeated it again and again. Scientists and military commanders studied the recordings with equal parts horror and amazement. A single human frigate had charged into a fleet of 700 Veleth warships. It had crashed directly into their command vessel. And it had one dot. The Veleth were supposed to be unstoppable. They had conquered 37 species. They had destroyed civilizations that were old when humanity was still learning to make fire. No one had ever defeated them in a fair fight, and now a tiny patrol ship had killed their fleet admiral. On the occupied world of Thesan Prime, the news arrived in the middle of the night. The Thesani people had been slaves for 200 years. Their cities were ruins. Their culture was nearly forgotten. They had learned to keep their heads down and obey their masters. But when they heard about the impact, something changed in a hidden basement beneath a destroyed temple. A group of resistance fighters gathered around an old communication device. They had been dormant for decades, too afraid to act, too certain that rebellion meant death. Their leader was an old female named Voss. Her silver body was covered with scars from years of punishment. She listened to the recording of the battle, watching as the human ship flew into the heart of the enemy fleet. They gave them 30 seconds to surrender, Voss said slowly. And the humans chose to fight. They were going to die anyway, said one of the younger fighters. What choice did they have? They could have surrendered. They could have given up their colony locations and saved themselves. Voss turned to face her people. But they did not. They chose to die protecting others. The room was silent. For 200 years, we have been afraid, Voss continued. We have told ourselves that resistance is impossible, that the Velith cannot be beaten. But look at this. She pointed to the recording, frozen on the moment of impact. One ship. 200 people. They hurt the Velith more in 30 seconds than we have in 2 centuries. Her voice grew stronger. If they can do this, what can we do? If they are willing to die for strangers, are we not willing to die for our own freedom? The resistance on Thesan Prime came alive that night. Within weeks, they had destroyed 3 Velith outposts. Within months, the entire planet was in open rebellion, but Thesan Prime was just the beginning. On the slave stations of the Karth Belt, the workers heard the story. These were people from a dozen different species, forced to mine precious metals for their Velith masters. They worked until they died, replaced by new slaves as fast as they fell. The station supervisors tried to suppress the news. They blocked communications and punished anyone caught talking about the humans. But the story spread anyway, whispered in the darkness of the mining tunnels. One night, the workers rose up. They seized control of 3 mining platforms in a single coordinated attack. It was messy and bloody, and many of them died. But when the sun rose on the Karth Belt, the Velith flag no longer flew over those stations. The human flag flew instead at Nexus Station, the diplomatic hub of the galaxy. Representatives from 7 species met in secret. These were people who had never cooperated before. Some had been enemies for thousands of years. But now they sat together at one table, united by a common cause. Lieutenant General Song Mi-Ray represented humanity at these meetings. She was a tall woman with gray hair and calm eyes, chosen for this mission because of her experience with alien cultures. "We are calling ourselves the Indomitable Pact," said the Thesani ambassador, named after the human ship. Mi-Ray nodded respectfully. "We are honored. Tell me something, General." The ambassador leaned forward, his silver form reflecting the lights of the meeting room. "How do your people do it? How do you find the courage to face impossible odds?" Mi-Ray thought about this for a long moment. She thought about Captain Park Ga, still recovering in a medical facility. She thought about the 47 survivors who had chosen to fly toward death rather than surrender. "We do not find courage," Mi-Ray said finally. "We create it. Every time we face a difficult choice, we make ourselves brave. It is not something we are born with. It is something we choose." The ambassador was quiet for a long time. Then he spoke slowly. "For 200 years, my people waited for someone to save us. We hoped that another species would come and free us from the Velith. We never considered saving ourselves. And now? Myray asked. Now we understand. Freedom is not given. It is taken. And if we want it, we must fight for it ourselves. The indomitable pact grew quickly after that. Species that had been conquered joined forces with species that were still free. Resources were shared. Information was exchanged. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Veleth faced organized resistance. But the real change was not political. It was personal. On 100 different worlds, people who had given up hope began to hope again. Children who had been taught that the Veleth were invincible learned about the impact. Workers who had accepted their slavery began to dream of freedom. The story was told in many different ways. Some versions were accurate. Others added details that never happened. But the core of the story remained the same. 30 seconds. One choice. Everything changed. Captain GA knew nothing of this while she recovered. She spent 6 weeks in the medical facility, undergoing surgery after surgery. Her body had been badly damaged in the impact. Doctors were not sure she would ever walk again, but she did walk again. Slowly, painfully, she learned to move. First with crutches, then with a cane. Finally, on her own, with only a slight limp to remind her of what she had survived. When she was finally released from the medical facility, she was surprised to find crowds waiting for her. Not just humans, but aliens of every shape and size. They had come from across the galaxy to see the woman who had changed everything. I do not understand, GA said to General Myray, who had come to escort her. I did not do this for recognition. I did it because I had no other choice. That is exactly why they admire you, Myray replied. You did not think about being a hero. You just did what needed to be done. As they walked through the crowd, GA saw faces of species she had never encountered. Some had bodies of pure light. Others were made of crystal or liquid or living metal. They were different in every possible way, but they all looked at her with the same expression, hope. A young Lasani approached her. He could not have been more than the equivalent of a human teenager. His silver skin was marked with the scars of slavery. Captain Park, he said, struggling with the human words. Thank you. GA looked at him with confusion. For what? For teaching us that we can fight back. For showing us that the Veleth can lose. She put her hand on his shoulder. It felt strange to touch an alien being, but somehow also right. I only fought one battle, she said gently. You are fighting for your world, your people, your future. That is much harder than what I did. The young Dasani stood a little taller. We will not fail. We will be indomitable too. GA smiled. It was the first real smile she had managed since the battle. I know you will, she said. I know you will. As she continued walking, surrounded by allies new and old, she realized something important. The impact had not been an ending. It had been a beginning. Across the galaxy, fires were burning. Some were fires of destruction, as the Veleth retaliated against the rebellions. But others were fires of hope, lit in the hearts of beings who had forgotten how to dream. And it had all started with one ship, one crew, and one impossible choice. 30 seconds had changed the galaxy forever. 1 year after the Battle of the Void, the Veleth Empire requested negotiations, thought it was an event that no one had thought possible. The Veleth did not negotiate. They conquered. They dominated. They destroyed. In 10,000 years of expansion, they had never once asked for peace. But now they had no choice. The indomitable pact had grown into something they could not ignore. Dozens of systems were in open rebellion. Their military was stretched across too many fronts. Every week brought news of another defeat, another lost colony, another commander killed by resistance fighters. The meeting was arranged on neutral ground, an ancient space station at the edge of known space. No one knew who had built it or why they had abandoned it. But it was empty and peaceful, far from any active conflict. The Velith arrived in a massive warship, the largest vessel their fleet had left. It was meant to intimidate, to remind everyone that they were still powerful. The human delegation arrived in a simple passenger shuttle. Unarmed and unprotected, Captain Park Jie led the human team. She walked with a slight limp now, a permanent reminder of the impact. Her uniform was decorated with medals she had never asked for and did not particularly want. Behind her came General Song Mireille and several other officials. The meeting room was circular, with seats arranged around a central table. The Velith delegation was already there when the humans arrived. 10 tall figures with gray skin and black eyes. Watching in perfect silence, at their head sat the High Chancellor, the most powerful Velith still alive. It was an ancient creature, older than most human civilizations. It had conquered more worlds than anyone could count. Now it sat across from a woman who had destroyed its predecessor with nothing but a small ship and an unwillingness to surrender. "You are the one," the Chancellor said. Its translator turned the clicking sounds into flat, emotionless words. "The one who chose death over submission." Jie looked at the alien without fear. "I am the one who chose to live on my own terms. There's a difference." The Chancellor's mandibles clicked, a sound that might have been frustration or confusion. "You have disrupted our empire. Dozens of systems burn with rebellion. Our military cannot contain the uprisings. You have done what no species has accomplished in 10,000 years. I did not do it alone. No." The Chancellor leaned forward. "You inspired others. That is what we cannot understand. We offered you survival. We gave you a chance to live. And you chose annihilation. It defies all logic." Jia smiled slightly. "That is because your logic is incomplete. Explain. You believe that survival is the highest value. That any being will do anything to stay alive." She paused. "For humans, that is not true. Some things matter more to us than living. Dignity, freedom, protecting those we love. Protecting even those we have never met." The Chancellor was silent for a long moment. "We gave you 30 seconds to make a decision," it said finally. "That was a test. We wanted to see what kind of species you were. Most beings would have surrendered immediately. A few would have tried to run. No one had ever attacked. Now you know what kind of species we are," Jie replied. "Yes, and it terrifies us." The word hung in the air. It was the first time anyone had ever heard a Velith admit to fear. "You are not the strongest species we have faced," the Chancellor continued. "Your weapons are not the most advanced. Your ships are not the fastest. But you have something we cannot defeat. You have a willingness to sacrifice that we cannot understand or predict." Mireille spoke up. "Is that why you asked for these negotiations?" "It is one reason." The Chancellor turned its black eyes toward her. "The rebellions we could eventually crush. But word of this human captain has spread throughout our empire. Our own soldiers are asking questions. Our slaves are finding courage. The very foundation of our control is cracking." It looked back at Jie. "You have changed the galaxy, human. With one ship in 30 seconds, you have ended a 10,000-year reign." The negotiations lasted for 6 months. Every detail was argued, debated, and finally agreed upon. The resulting treaty was the most important document in galactic history. Protected zones were established, areas where the Velith were forbidden to enter. Formerly occupied worlds were granted independence. Diplomatic channels were opened between species that had never spoken before. It was not perfect. The Velith were still powerful. There were still conflicts and disagreements. The galaxy did not become peaceful overnight, but it was a beginning. When the treaty was finally signed, Representatives from 37 species attended the ceremony. Some had been conquered by the Velith for centuries. Others had lived in fear, waiting for the day when the gray ships would appear in their skies. Now they stood together, watching as history changed course. After the ceremony, GA found herself standing alone on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. She was tired. Her leg hurt. She wanted nothing more than to go home and sleep for a year. But someone came to join her. It was the Dasani teenager she had met a year ago, now grown into a young man. His silver skin no longer bore the marks of slavery. He stood tall and proud, wearing the uniform of his planet's new defense force. "Captain Park," he said, "I wanted to thank you again. You already thanked me once." That was enough. No, it was not. He stepped closer. "Do you know what happens on Thiessen Prime now? Children play in the streets. People laugh without fear. We are rebuilding our culture, rediscovering who we were before the Velith came." GA smiled. "That is good to hear. It happened because of you. Because one human woman refused to give up. It happened because your people chose to fight," GA corrected. "I lit a spark. You built the fire." The young Dasani nodded slowly. "Will you come to Thiessen Prime someday? We are building a monument to the Indomitable. We would be honored if you could see it." "I would like that," GA said. "I would like that very much." Years later, a monument was built on the surface of Luna, Earth's moon. It was placed on the side that faced Earth, so that it could be seen from the home of humanity. The monument showed a small ship flying toward an overwhelming fleet. Its engines burned bright. Its bow pointed straight at the enemy. It was frozen in the moment before impact, forever defiant dot at the base of the monument. A simple inscription was written in 12 languages, dedicated to the crew of the Indomitable, who taught the galaxy that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important. Captain Park GA attended the dedication ceremony. She was older now, her hair gray and her face lined with years. But her eyes were still sharp, still fierce, still undefeated. Around her stood the surviving crew members. Commander Yoon-Harry, who had gone on to become an admiral. Navigation Officer Baek Yoonji, now teaching at the academy. Lieutenant Kim Do-yeon, working as a translator for the Galactic Council. Engineering Chief Kang Soo-min, designing new ships that would never have to make the choice the Indomitable had made. Dr. Choi Yuna, still saving lives wherever she went. They stood together, these 47 survivors, and watched as representatives of 37 species placed flowers at the memorial. "Do you ever regret it?" Harry asked quietly. "The decision you made that day?" Gia was silent for a long moment. She thought about the friends she had lost, the pain she had suffered, the nightmares that still visited her sometimes in the darkness. "No," she said finally. "I would make the same choice again. And again. And again. Even knowing the cost. Especially knowing the cost." Gia turned to look at her old friend. Some prices are worth paying. Some fights are worth fighting. And some choices define not just who we are, but who we can become. She looked up at the monument, at the tiny ship facing impossible odds. "They gave us 30 seconds to surrender. We gave them an answer they will never forget. Somewhere out there, the galaxy continued to change. Old empires fell. New alliances formed. Species that had been enemies for millennia learned to live in peace. And at the heart of it all was a simple truth that humanity had proven. You do not need to be the strongest to change the world. You do not need to be the smartest or the fastest or the most advanced dot. You just need to be willing to stand up when everyone else is sitting down, to say no when everyone else is saying yes, to choose the hard right over the easy wrong dot." The Indomitable had done exactly that. And in doing so, it had become something more than a ship. It had become a symbol, a promise, a declaration that would echo through the ages. When the universe pushes humanity, humanity pushes back. Always.